Now, why all this? I mean, the answer is simple, is that it looks from the Israeli point of view that a number of factors make it more and more impossible that a two-state solution would include a Palestinian state that would be militarily capable of threatening Israel, or a Palestinian state which could be undermined from within, say by Hamas, in ways that would create a non-state actor threat from inside the territory of that state. So the Jordan Valley, the reason for it is simple. The airspace, the sea space, it's simple. As time has passed over the last 25 years, as we're all aware, asymmetrical warfare capabilities and counter-terrorism capabilities have increased pari passu, just right one along with the other. So missiles, now with Iran and Syria and Hezbollah, as in the equation as very significant players with the capacity to manufacture, in the case of Iran, missiles. We're not talking about nuclear capacity, we're talking about the manufacture of missiles and the possibility of smuggling them across the borders. A basic reason this Israeli demand is rooted in the sense that without some demand of this kind, there's a real threat of a military confrontation between the state of Israel and the Palestinian state, and these measures are designed to eliminate that possibility. Taking it the next step, it's also the case that even the final proposal by Barak, there were still many, many settlements now under Palestinian sovereignty scattered across the West Bank. And they were connected by the famous roads. The Barak proposal still totally made those roads the province of the IDF. The Israeli military would control the roads, not in the sense that nobody else would be able to go along them, but in the sense that when the Israeli military considered it to be necessary to interrupt passage along the roads, they would be able to do so. Now, a very interesting thing in the Taba follow-up to the main negotiation, a very fascinating development to me, was that in the last round, it appears that the Israeli government relaxed the demand to continue to occupy the Jordan Valley with settlements and military forces, and they said, here's what we'll do instead. We will just have a set of bases, military posts and bases scattered along. We won't demand continuous territorial control. Why? Because the counterterrorism side makes it more and more possible to use electronics and advanced weaponry to exercise control inside this area without actually a full-scale physical occupation. So a very big thing, when you look at the maps proposed, you really get the claim does appear to be true that the territory of the West Bank was just radically divided up, but that's not really the end of it. Israeli military intelligence and policing and surveillance control would have been, under this most favorable agreement, overwhelming. And of course, in a two-state solution, the Israeli state, with overwhelming military superiority, also, there would be no Palestinian standing army, there would be a Palestinian police force, not a Palestinian standing army, and no Palestinian air force. So at any time in this context, if the state of Israel, the Israeli government, thought it was in any way under threat from a security point of view, they would have had the capacity to intervene absolutely anywhere in the territory of the new state with complete impunity. So the basic picture, so, and that's supposed to be a deal whose time is long past. Since 2000, there are another something like 100,000 settlers in the West Bank. But I think those settlers could be removed. It's not that they're, but the point is that the background security picture from the Israeli point of view seems to me to make it look like this. Obama, in order to get a 60-day extension of the housing freeze, offered something that Barack had given away a Taliban. That is occupation in the Jordan Valley, military presence in the Jordan Valley. The posture of the Obama administration while trying to get Netanyahu to continue inside the negotiations was to offer military hardware and technology, and then to say, we accept, before it's even been negotiated with the Palestinians, that there will be a military presence in the Jordan Valley. That doesn't mean controlling the bridges across the Jordan River. That means preventing infiltration by controlling the whole border. So it just doesn't look like, well, would that just be obviously unacceptable? Is it the case that nobody could ever go that way? It would be inconceivable. You could argue that the Palestinians would never in a million years accept anything like that. They would never accept anything like that because there would be a very serious danger that they would be thrown out of power by a mass revolt by the Palestinian population if they went for a deal that restricted the state to that extent. However, the weakness of the authority and the Obama administration's overwhelming interest in being able to claim that they did something could conceivably have led a deal like that to be crammed down the throats of the Palestinians. Now, I guess today, Netanyahu announced 240 more permits for construction in Jerusalem. The Americans were quite annoyed. They expressed some discomfort with this decision by Netanyahu. And, Abu Mazen said he was breaking off negotiations and wouldn't lead any further. Now, my reaction to that is, whew, what a relief that, as a matter of fact, we're not down the road to that deal. So that's the sort of extreme dystopian version of it. One-state solution. So if we're talking about a one-state solution, on some level, as a matter of political philosophy or ethics, because I'm an atheist with strong cosmopolitan commitments and a leftist, I am attracted to a one-state majoritarian solution, but as an American multiculturalist, I also believe that group rights are completely acceptable. Straightforward majoritarianism is no more particularly admirable to me than straightforward majoritarianism has vast drawbacks. I'm all in favor of federalism, entrenched positions, and so forth. And binationalism seems to me a highly attractive idea. I think that the idea that Israel is a Jewish state is almost, it's a very emotionally intense formula which has either a content you could easily get away from. In other words, you could have a state, all of its cultural symbols, national anthem, the menorah would have, there would be a million binational symbolisms or trinational symbolisms. In that case, the idea is easily reconcilable with the idea of a binational state. But the other meaning of it is a right of the Jewish people to a large and stable majority in Israel proper, which seems to imply a right to transfer population in some way if the large and stable majority were threatened, and to a priori allow rejection of any form of right of return. So in those, the idea of the Jewish state seems to be not easily defensible in that more maximalist version, and Israeli public opinion seems to fluctuate across the range from merely cultural to the extreme of a maximal authorization for transforming the population to preserve a large and stable majority. So a one-state solution for the whole territory could be devised, I imagine, though not anytime soon. This would take a very long time. That would be binational, federal, with very elaborate entrenchment of rights for everybody in the system, a major role for courts of different types, but also a bicameral legislature. Remember, we don't have majoritarianism in the United States at all. 41 members of the Senate from states with a population that's about 25% of the whole US population have a veto on legislation. So it's easy to imagine very complex, you know, we have Utah, Wyoming, Colorado, and Idaho. You know, that's 8 votes in the Senate right there. So it's easy to imagine a complex structure. Moreover, it's easy to see the argument that the Arabs in Israel should have a binational state solution. And it's easy to see that in the West Bank already, there is already a binational state solution based on radical inequality, exploitation, and racial division, but it's already, in that sense, a binational state. So I'm in favor of the binational state idea. I don't think, however, that it's easy to see any short-term route. Not talking about a one-state solution, meaning a majoritarian one state. I don't see any short or easy route to a binational system of the type that I just described. So now everyone says to me at this point, so what are you in favor of? So here's what I'm in favor of. I'm in favor of Americans and people who live in the United States pressuring the US government to make concessions with respect to the occupation on the ground, step by step, detail by detail, with respect to the aspects of the occupation which are apartheid-like, really oppressive, have a strong overtone of a police state, as well as a completely racialist state. So I think we should pressure our government to side with the Palestinians in the reordering of the West Bank, and we should pressure the government to side with them inside Israel. And then I think that the left, or people who are activists, should, as their program, advocate divestment and boycotting of Israel, starting at the civil society level where it's already begun. So the students at Amherst, the students at Berkeley, it is possible, we know this from the British experience, and it's not because of British anti-Semitism, in my opinion, it's because of British political correctness, in this case, in my opinion, to have a very rapidly growing boycott divestment movement that isn't just oriented to pressuring the government, that starts at the civil society level with local institutions. And that kind of program looks more plausible today than it's ever looked before, because it seems to be the case that in US opinion, a very complicated shift is occurring in which support for Israel continues to grow among Christian fundamentalists and among the part of the population which identifies in a kind of national religious way with the Israeli project, but at the level of the ruling classes, that is, university-educated people, the people who Obama has made the rulers of everything, it looks like that support is falling. So I think there's a possibility of giant momentum for divestment and boycotts starting small and growing little by little in the US, and that's the most hopeful thing that I can think of.
Thank you very much.